When your child is sick in the middle of the night, sometimes it's kind of hard to know whether to rush to the ER, call your pediatrician, or just help your child feel better at home. So we are going to take some of the mystery out of it today. Pediatrician and author of If Your Kid Eats This Book, Everything Will Still Be Okay, Dr. Laura Zibners is here to explain what's a true emergency and what is not. I love the title of your book.
Thank you.
That is fabulous, and so is the book. I read it cover to cover. It really helped me out to know. Let's help everybody else out too.
Okay.
Starting with a fever.
Sure.
Because I know parents get really nervous about this, I used to get really nervous about this too. Is there ever a fever that's too high, so high that it's dangerous and you need to rush to the ER?
No. This is when I was writing this book, I had friends calling me, my colleagues, saying, please, please, please tell them there's no such thing as a fever too high. Because if your kid is over 3 months and otherwise healthy, your body is generating the fever to fight infection. Fever is a symptom. It's not the thing to be worried about. What we worry about is what's causing the illness in the first place, that the fever is a symptom of. So if your brain is generating fever, it's never going to take a temperature to a point that boils the brain or causes brain damage. Parents always worry about this because of seizures, but in reality that's a very small percentage of kids who are going to have a seizure, and they're going to have it in that rise of temperature. It's not because it gets to some magic number and cooks their brain.
So even when they have the seizure, because that can be really scary, it happened to a friend of mine, you still don't need to go to the hospital.
If you can keep yourself from calling the ambulance, which I recognize is a
so
really hard
it
thing to
is.
do. You have to remember it's about 3% of kids between the ages of 6 months to 6 years, but averaging about 3 years old, and they're going to have a seizure with the fever, and it's that usual first couple days of illness, and the rise in temperature. If you can wait it out, and if it's the whole body, and if it stops in 5 minutes, then it's okay just to call your pediatrician. But I fully understand that most parents are not going to, that 5 minutes is going to seem like 4 hours, so.
Okay, let's move on to vomiting and stomach pain. I mean, if your kid just throws up, okay, whatever. But when they're throwing up quite a bit, terrible stomach pain, should you go to the hospital?
You know, the thing about belly pain and vomiting, it's usually these illnesses, they're sort of a dynamic thing. They're going to change with time. So that to run to the hospital in the first hour or two of belly pain or vomiting is probably not going to change anything or help. You have to remember, vomiting usually comes with diarrhea, and when the two come together, it's almost always a virus, and it usually starts with the vomiting. So they'll vomit for 8 to 12 hours, then comes the diarrhea, the vomiting will slow down, you can get the sips of liquid in then. The best thing to do is to call your pediatrician if you're ever concerned, because your pediatrician can keep an open dialogue going, and then he can check in with you in 2 or 3 hours and help you make that decision.
Don't go and sit in the ER. All right, so my husband and I panicked and dialed 911 when my daughter wasn't breathing right at 2 months, and it turns out it was the right thing because she was having an allergic reaction. But how do you know? Is it an emergency? Is it just wheezing?
Well, wheezing can be an emergency. So what I say is, if you're ever in doubt that you're worried that your child's going to stop breathing or this is life-threatening, call 911. That's why they're there. And when it comes to breathing, if it looks like breathing has become a job and not just something your kid does without thinking about it, that's the time to look for medical attention urgently.
So let's talk about coloring, because parents of new babies often look thinking their baby might be a little blue or a little yellow, but it needs to be more than just a little. Is that the case?
It depends on where the color is. So for example, if you're worried that your baby's jaundiced and they're looking yellow, well, it could be olive skin tones. You know, I've got a little olive hue to me. If the eyeball is white, the baby is not jaundiced. Same thing with blue. If it's blue around in this very thin skin around the mouth or in the hands and feet, that's okay. That's just blood shunting away to parts where it's needed. When the blueness is on the lips, on the tongue, centrally, on the chest, then that's time to call, because a blue baby is an emergency.
Okay. Feeding your baby in the middle of the night. This happens to parents. You fall asleep, holding the baby, you're exhausted, the baby rolls to the floor. Is that an emergency? Do you need to call right away?
You don't need to call 911 right away, but I would, if it's a small baby, especially under 6 months, I would call your pediatrician just to check. We have a little rule that we say if they're under 3 months and they fall from a height of over 3 feet, they probably need to be seen, but not always. And if, you know, she's crying and she's looking at you and she's angry and she's moving everything, it's okay to pick her up, take a minute, take a deep breath, and then call your
crying yourself.
Exactly.
Right? Your toddler swallows something, a tiny button, a little toy. It goes down, and they're not choking, and they're breathing okay, and they're not drooling. They're okay? Do you need to call? Do you need to go?
You know, again, I say if you're ever worried, pick up the phone and call your pediatrician. But remember, most of the stuff they swallow, we can't even see on X-ray. We can't see Legos and Barbie shoes and buttons. So we're not going to do anything about it anyway if the kid looks well. And you don't have to watch for it to come out in the poop.
It doesn't have to, you don't have to see it come out. Well,
No.
isn't that a gift from Mom and Dad? Thank you so much for letting us know.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for coming in.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Wealth of information you are. And for more great information, pick up a copy of Dr. Zibner's book. If your kid eats this book, everything will still be okay. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you soon.